Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Today we're going to get back into our very basic Bible study. I may sound a little funny because I've had a cold for a few days, but feeling better now, so we'll jump into it and see what God's Word has to say. Today we're going to be looking at chapter 41 of Genesis. You remember in the last chapter, Joseph interpreted dreams of two of his fellow prisoners, and his interpretation came to pass. They happened. But the cupbearer that was restored to his former job either forgot or neglected to mention Joseph to the Pharaoh. And so now some time has passed, and we're going to see what happens. So let's look at chapter 41. Verse 1. Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. So, since the last chapter, 2 years have gone by. And Joseph is still a prisoner, and I guess still has the same role in the prison. You know, the chief jailer had turned everything over to him because he was trustworthy and efficient and everything. So it'd be like a modern day trustee, except with actually more authority. But still, he's a prisoner. His liberty is inhibited. Verse 2. And lo, from the Nile there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grasses. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and gaunt, and they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. Verse 5. And then he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. We see quite often in the Bible that God will kind of affirm a dream by having a subsequent dream follow it. And that's apparently what we have here. Verse 8. Now it came about in the morning that his spirit was troubled. So he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told him his dream, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. So the dreams were sharp enough and lingered in his memory to the point where it bothered him and troubled him. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. And we had a dream on the same night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now a Hebrew youth was with us there, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard, and we related to him, and he interpreted our dream for us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came about that just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me in my office, but he hanged him. So the cupbearer finally steps forward and mentions this to the Pharaoh. Now it could be that selfish motive involved. He thought he could make some points if Joseph could interpret the dream. Or it may just have been a sincere remembrance. It could be that over those 2 years he felt bad for not mentioning Joseph. We don't know, but at any rate, he does mention him to Pharaoh. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. The Egyptians were clean-shaven, neat, orderly, and so he had to get himself cleaned up before he met with the Pharaoh. Verse 15, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it, and I have heard it said about you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it. Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So Joseph, still true to God, giving God the credit. He's been there now, 13 years imprisoned. He was 17 when he was taken to Egypt, and now he's 30. And he's been in prison all that time. And he had had dreams before that he had shared with his brothers, remember? And during all this time, it appears that he hasn't questioned God. He hasn't turned his back on God. He's trusted that what he dreamed would come to pass. And now he's giving God the credit for whatever he shows him in the Pharaoh's regard. Verse 17, so Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, in my dream, behold, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, and behold, 7 cows fat and sleek came up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the marsh grass, and lo, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such as I had never seen for ugliness in all the land of Egypt. And the lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. And then in verse 21, he adds a little bit of information. Yet when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had devoured them, for they were just as ugly as before. Then I awoke. I saw also in my dream, and behold, 7 ears full and good came up on a single stalk. And lo, 7 ears withered thin and scorched by the east wind sprouted up after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. Then I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. So he's given Joseph the whole lowdown. Verse 25. Now Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. And the 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 thin ears scorched by the east winds shall be 7 years of famine. It is as I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Now he's going to explain what the dreams meant. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of the subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God, and God will quickly bring it to pass. Now he goes even further and gives Pharaoh some advice. Verse 33. And now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. Then let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. And let the food become as a reserve for the land for the severe years of famine which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish during the famine. So it's a pretty detailed advice that he gives to Pharaoh. And in verse 37, the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Verse 38, then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over all my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. So we see right here the outworking of Joseph's dreams coming to fruition. He's waited many long years in imprisonment, but now it must have been very exciting for Joseph to see what was happening almost at the snap of a finger. But God has been working behind the scenes all these years, and now his plan is becoming evident. Verse 41, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, bow the knee. And he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh was pretty discerning, and God had prepared his heart, because in today's world of politics, it's hard to find somebody that would actually listen. You would find it very difficult to find somebody that would give credit to God for anything. But Pharaoh has done both. He's listened to Joseph. He's listened to the interpretation. It made sense. And God had prepared Pharaoh's heart, and he put Joseph in charge. Verse 44. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. Knowing Joseph and how he was true to the Lord, ran from sin when tempted by his first master's wife, we can kind of infer here that Joseph would not marry an unbeliever. So it's quite possible that, and we don't know how much time passed here. It's not like, okay, I'm putting you over all the land and here's my daughter, if you marry her. No. Some time had probably passed, and I'm going to infer that Asenath was probably a believer in Jacob's God by the time they actually married. Just a personal opinion, but other commentators have come to the same belief. Verse 46, now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of the Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. Now Egypt was very large, and so for Joseph to go through all the land of Egypt means that he worked. I mean, he took his role seriously. He just didn't sit back and give commands to people, but he traveled around that whole country. I'm sure he was involved in the designing of barns and storage houses. But during this 7 years, he was working, not just sitting in some royal palace doing nothing. He was out there working. Verse 47. And during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food of the 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and placed the food in the cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Verse 50. Now before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And he named the second Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. When the 7 years of plenty which had been in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So Joseph's plan, certainly inspired by God, is working. So the famine comes, but the people aren't starving. There's food. Verse 55. So when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, you shall do. When the famine was spread over all the face of the earth, then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land. You know, you wonder, why did he sell the food to the Egyptians? And one obvious reason is so they wouldn't take it for granted. It would have value. And as such, they wouldn't overuse it. They wouldn't waste it. They were having to pay for this. It wasn't a free handout, something our government might want to learn today even. But so even though he had gathered this from the farms around these different towns, when the famine comes, now it's being sold back to the people. Verse 57. And the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. Anyway, it's just amazing to see God's work. To us it seems very slow. And sometimes that affects our faith, because as humans, especially in today's society, we want to see things happen now, right now, fix it now, take care of it right away. But God has a perfect timing for his plan, and the outworking might come over a period of years or decades or even centuries. But his plan is going to come to fruition. It's going to prevail. And we're going to stop here today, but in the next lesson, we're going to see how this all starts to come together as Joseph's family now is starving, and they're going to have to come to Egypt to try to buy some food. And we'll see how all that works out. And again, it's all part of God's plan, and it's going to have implications for hundreds and hundreds of years. So we'll look at that next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching. God bless. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.